They told everyone it was an accident, that they lost track of me on the trail and drove off to get help. But when I finally got out of that forest, I realized they never intended to come back. What would you do if your own family left you behind like disposable luggage? Before you scroll past, read this to the end and tell me if I'm wrong. And if you've ever had family turn on you, I want your honest opinion. My name is Ethan Mercer. I'm 68 years old, a grandfather, and I used to be a forest ranger in Colorado for nearly 3 decades. I know woods, weather, and the kind of panic that gets people killed. I also know the difference between getting lost and being abandoned. It started as a family weekend that my son insisted we needed. Jason called on a Wednesday night, voice bright in that forced way people get when they're selling you something. "Dad, we found this cabin near Pine Creek," he said. "Real quiet. No neighbors. No distractions. Amber thinks it would be good for you. For all of us. You and the kids." I didn't even want to go. After my wife passed, I learned to keep my world small. My chair, my coffee, my granddaughter Lily's visits, and the few men from my old station who still called me by my first name instead of sir. But Jason pressed. He always did. He'd learned long ago that if he wrapped something in the word family, I'd show up with my shoes tied and my wallet open. Amber got on the phone next, sweet as syrup. "We just want you included, Ethan," she said. "You've been alone too much." Alone too much. As if my solitude was a mistake they were generous enough to correct. Still, Lily was going. That's what did it. "Grandpa," she whispered when I called to confirm. "Please come. Mom said it'll be better if you're there." Better. Not fun, not exciting. Better. Those words sat in my chest like a stone. So Friday morning, I loaded my old Tacoma. Packed sensible. Extra water, wool layers, headlamp, first aid kit, fire starter. The kind of gear that comes from habit, not hobby. Jason laughed when he saw it. "Dad, it's a cabin weekend, not an expedition." I smiled and didn't argue. Rangers learn quickly that you don't waste breath on people who think the woods are a themed attraction. We drove 2 hours into the mountains. Past cell service, past gas stations, past the last mile marker that would matter to anyone not paying attention. The cabin was real enough. Timber walls, a propane stove, a deck that looked out over a slope of lodgepole pine that tilted down into shadow. Amber's parents were there too. Randall and Marcy. Both of them dressed like they'd come to take pictures, not spend time. Randall shook my hand with a grip that tried to win something. "Ethan," he said, like he was tasting the name, "Jason tells me you used to be a ranger. That must have been quaint." Quaint. Like my career had been whittling spoons in a tourist shop. Amber hovered behind him, eyes tracking my jacket, my truck, my boots, like she was taking inventory. Lily came to me the moment she could. She wrapped both arms around my waist, tight, and didn't let go right away. She was 10 years old and already learning which adults smiled with their teeth and which smiled with their intentions. "You okay?" I asked softly. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, I'm fine." But she didn't look fine. She looked like a kid trying to hold water in her hands. That first evening they drank wine on the deck and talked about money like it was weather. Rates, houses, the market. Randall bragged about a new boat. Marcy asked Jason if he'd ever thought about taking advantage of my property while values were high. Amber laughed like it was harmless. I watched them the way you watch a creek after a storm, the surface moving fast, the undertow hidden. After dinner, Amber put a hand on Jason's shoulder and said, "Why don't you take your dad up to that overlook tomorrow? The one you mentioned. It'll be good for him. Nostalgic." Jason lit up, performing. "Yeah," he said. "Dad, you'll love it. It's easy. Couple miles." I looked at Lily. She wasn't eating her dessert. She was staring at her plate like the plate might tell her what to do. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was afraid of the forest. The forest is honest. It will hurt you, but it won't lie to your face first. I was awake because of the voices I heard through the thin cabin wall. Amber's voice, low but sharp. Jason's, softer, defensive. "You promised," Amber said. "You promised you'd handle it this weekend." "Hush," Jason answered. "He'll hear." Then Randall's voice joined in, amused. "If he's stubborn, we can't force him. But accidents happen, don't they?" Marcy chuckled. "In the woods? All the time." I sat in the dark with my eyes open, listening to my own heartbeat, and I told myself I was misinterpreting, that families get weird when money's involved, but they don't cross certain lines. In the morning, Jason announced our hike like it was a gift. Amber packed snacks. Randall handed Jason a shiny new handheld GPS unit and made a show of it. "So you boys don't get lost," he said. The GPS was unnecessary. The trail was marked. The day was clear. And I carried a map in my pocket out of habit. Lily tried to come with us. Amber stopped her. "No, honey. This is grandfather time. You stay here with Grandma Marcy." Lily's eyes flicked to me. A silent plea. I gave her a small nod that meant I saw her. That meant, I'm paying attention. Jason and I started up the trail a little after 10. The air smelled like sap and cold stone. Sunlight speared through the pines in bright slats. Jason walked too fast at first, then slowed, letting me catch up. He tried to make conversation. "Work's been crazy," he said. "Bills, you know." I did know. I'd covered as crazy for years. Mortgage gaps, credit card emergencies. "Just until next month, Dad." "Yeah," I said. "I know." He glanced at my day pack. "You really brought all that." "Old habits," I said. He snorted. "You're retired. You can stop acting like you're on duty." The words bothered me more than they should have, not because they were insulting, but because they sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced stripping me down from capable to old out loud. We reached the first junction, a split where the main trail continued left and a narrower path cut right toward the ridge. Jason stopped and checked the GPS dramatically. "This way," he said, pointing right. I frowned. "Overlooks off the main trail." He looked annoyed for a split second, then smoothed his face. "This is a shortcut. Trust me." Trust me. A phrase that has buried more men than weather ever did. Still, I followed. Not because I believed him, but because I wanted to see where this was going. The shortcut narrowed quickly. Brush closed in. Fallen branches forced us to step off and back on. The farther we went, the less it looked like a maintained trail, and the more it looked like a route someone could later claim was hard to follow. After a mile, Jason stopped again. "I need to use the bathroom," he said. He stepped off into the trees, then came back too fast. "You go ahead," he said. "I'll catch up." That was the moment I should have turned around. Not because I can't walk alone. I can. I have. But because the way he said it sounded like a man trying to get away from a scene he didn't want to witness. I didn't go ahead. I stood still and listened. The forest has layers of sound. Wind in the canopy, a distant bird, your own breath. And then, faint, a car door slam. I turned in place slowly. "Jason?" I called. No answer. I pushed through the brush where he'd gone, found nothing but bent fern fronds and a scuffed boot print that pointed back the way we'd come. I started moving fast then, not panicked, but focused. The way you move when you know time is already being stolen from you. When I reached the main trail again, the air felt different. Quiet in a wrong way. I jogged downhill. When I got back to the small gravel pull-off where we'd parked, my Tacoma was there. Jason's SUV was not. I stood beside my truck, looking at the empty space, and waited for the obvious explanation. "We thought you went another way." "We drove to find service." We'll be back in 10 minutes. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. My phone showed no bars. Of course it didn't. I checked my truck. Keys were gone. Not lost. Gone. I always keep a spare key hidden, because that's the kind of paranoia you earn in a career spent finding other people's mistakes. The spare was gone too. My day pack was still on my shoulders, but the water bladder was half full. The trail snacks Amber packed were in Jason's hands. My extra bottle was missing. So was my small radio. They'd been careful enough to leave me with just enough to look plausible if anyone asked. I stood there a long time, watching the trees sway, and I felt something heavy settle into my bones. This wasn't an accident. This was a plan. I could have started walking immediately. I could have headed straight down toward the drainage where I knew a service road eventually crossed. But first I needed to understand the shape of what I was dealing with. So I did what I used to do on search and rescue calls. I assessed. Weather, stable, but mountain afternoons change fast. Terrain, steep, dense, easy to get hurt in. Resources, limited, but I had fire, a blade, a headlamp, and a brain that still worked even if my knees complained. Threats, dehydration, injury, hypothermia if I got caught after dark. And one more threat I didn't write on any clipboard in my career. My own son, deciding I was expendable. I started moving, not toward the cabin, but away from the road. If they'd left me there, they'd expect me to go where a lost man goes. Down trail, confused, looking for help. Instead, I climbed. There's an old maintenance route up that ridge. Not marked anymore, but the cut of the slope and the spacing of the trees still tell the story if you know how to read it. An hour in, I found the first piece of proof that made my stomach turn. A strip of bright orange survey tape, freshly tied to a branch at shoulder height. Not old, sun-faded tape. New. Someone had marked something. I followed the direction of the tape and found another strip, then another, spaced like breadcrumbs. Not to guide me to safety. To guide someone else to a place they wanted me to end up. That's when I stopped feeling hurt and started feeling cold. Because you don't accidentally prepare a route for abandoning someone unless you've talked about it ahead of time. I didn't follow the tape all the way. I circled around it instead, watching from a higher angle, the way you watch a site you suspect is dangerous. Half a mile later, I saw the glint of plastic and irrigation tubing through the trees. And then I smelled it. Fertilizer. Chemicals. A sharp, sour bite in the air. Illegal grow site. Not a few plants. An operation. I crouched behind a stump and watched two men move between rows with backpacks and cutters. One had a rifle slung over his shoulder like it belonged there. My first instinct, the old one, was to document and call it in. Then I remembered. My radio was gone. My phone was dead out here, and I was alone. I backed away carefully. A twig snapped anyway. The men froze. One turned his head slowly, scanning. "Hey!" he called. "Who's there?" I didn't run. Running turns you into prey. I moved like a shadow instead, easing downhill into thicker brush, using terrain to break sight lines. Behind me, I heard footsteps crash through undergrowth. "You better stop," the man shouted. I kept my breathing steady and let the forest do what it does best. Hide the patient. I angled toward a cluster of boulders I remembered from years ago. A small overhang, a seam in the rock you could tuck into if you knew it existed. I slid into it and went still. The footsteps came close. Too close. I could hear the man's breathing, the scrape of his boot on stone. Then his partner spoke, impatient. "Forget it. Probably a deer." A pause. The rifle strap creaked. "If someone saw," the first one muttered, "we'll handle it." They moved away. I waited until the sounds were gone before I let my lungs empty fully. I sat there in that rock seam, sweat cooling on my back, and I realized something that made my blood run colder than the chase. If my family had marked a route that led anywhere near this grow site, then one of two things was true. Either they were careless with my life, or they were hoping someone else would finish what they started. I kept moving as the afternoon slipped toward evening. I stayed high, away from the drainage and away from the marked tape. I found a seep of water, filtered it through cloth, boiled it, built a small fire in a depression shielded from wind. As darkness came down, the temperature dropped fast. I pulled my wool layer on, ate a small portion of what I had, and listened to the forest settle. Then I heard something that didn't belong. A distant engine, not on the road, too far, too muffled. The cabin. They were back there, warm, lit up, eating dinner, probably laughing about how Dad wandered off. I could have walked straight to them then, but I didn't, because I needed more than survival. I needed certainty, and I needed leverage. I moved at first light. I approached the cabin from the back slope, staying in tree cover until I could see the deck. Randall stood outside with coffee. Jason leaned against the railing, phone pressed to his ear, pacing. Amber was inside, visible through the window, moving like she was cleaning up after a party. And Lily. Lily was on the steps, wrapped in a blanket, shoulders tight, staring out into the woods like she was waiting for a ghost. Jason's voice carried when he raised it. "Yes, Sheriff, we can't find him," he said. "He's stubborn. He insisted he was fine. He's old school, you know. Probably got turned around." He paused, listening, then said something that made my grip tighten on the tree bark. I hope this doesn't become a whole thing. My dad's, confused lately. It's been getting worse." Confused. He was laying the groundwork. Not just for the sheriff. For anyone who'd listen. I pulled my phone out and tried again. One bar flickered, then vanished. But I didn't need cell service for what I did next. I had something else. A small satellite messenger I'd kept from my ranger days. Old, scuffed, but still alive. Amber hadn't found it because it wasn't in my truck. It was in my jacket lining, stitched into the seam like a habit I never outgrew. I stepped back into cover and sent one short message to one person. Caleb Dunn, retired state trooper, used to coordinate with our station on missing persons. Message: left behind. Not accident. Need discreet pickup and law contact. Then I waited. Second hook in the middle. 2 hours later, while the sheriff's search team was supposedly mobilizing, I heard Amber inside the cabin say, clear as daylight through an open window, "If he doesn't come out on his own, the court will sign the papers anyway." And Jason answered, "Then it'll be clean." That's when I realized this wasn't just abandonment. It was an extraction. I stayed hidden until dusk, watching the performance. Randall made calls, shaking his head like a worried patriarch. Marcy cried on cue, dabbing her eyes with a tissue that never got wet. Amber hugged Lily too tight, whispering sharp things in her ear. Jason walked outside and kicked at the dirt like a man devastated by guilt. But guilt doesn't make you check your watch every few minutes. When the sheriff's deputy finally arrived, he asked questions. I could see it in his posture. Professional, skeptical. Jason put his hands on his head and said, "I don't know what happened. He's always been independent. He didn't even want us here." Amber started sobbing. And then, because arrogance loves an audience, Randall said the quiet part. "He's got assets," Randall told the deputy like it was context. "We're just worried someone might take advantage. He's vulnerable." I watched that deputy's face shift. Not sympathy, something else, because good lawmen recognize a story that's being sold. An hour later, Caleb arrived, not in a marked cruiser, in an old gray SUV. He pulled into the drive like he belonged there, like a friend coming to help. Jason rushed to him, desperate. "Are you with the sheriff?" he asked. Caleb's voice carried just enough to reach me where I hid. "I'm with whoever wants your father alive," he said. Jason nodded too fast. Caleb spoke with the deputy, then with Amber and Randall. I saw Amber's eyes flick toward the cabin door, toward where I knew my truck keys had been taken. Then, right on schedule, Amber did what people like her always do when they think they're winning. She walked inside and came back out holding a folder. "My husband has power of attorney," she announced, voice trembling with manufactured bravery. "Ethan signed it months ago. We've been trying to help him manage things because he forgets." I felt my jaw tighten. I hadn't signed power of attorney, not months ago, not ever. Caleb took the folder, opened it, and looked at the papers without expression. Then he said very calmly, "These signatures need to be verified." Amber blinked. "Of course." Caleb's eyes lifted. "Also, your father-in-law's truck keys were reported missing at the trailhead." Funny coincidence. Jason stiffened. Randall stepped forward, offended. "Are you accusing us?" Caleb smiled in a way that wasn't friendly. "I'm listening," he said. "And I'm noticing." That was my moment. I didn't stumble out like a lost old man. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I stepped from the tree line into the yard like the woods had simply returned me, unharmed, because they respected me more than my own blood did. Lily saw me first. Her face cracked open in pure relief. She ran to me and slammed into my chest so hard it knocked the breath out of me. "Grandpa," she whispered. "I told them not to." I held her tight and looked over her head at my son. Jason's mouth fell open. Amber went pale. Randall's eyes narrowed like a man recalculating. Marcy made a strangled sound halfway between shock and anger. The deputy stepped forward. "Sir, are you Ethan Mercer?" "I am," I said. "Are you injured?" "No," I answered. "Just disappointed." Jason found his voice, rushing forward with arms open like he was about to hug me for the cameras. "Dad, thank God," he said loudly. "We've been terrified. You just disappeared." "Stop," I said. The word came out quiet, but it landed heavy. Jason froze. I looked at the deputy. "I want to make a statement." Amber tried to interrupt. "Ethan, please. You're confused." I turned my head slowly to her. "Don't call me confused again." The deputy watched her carefully after that. I told them the truth, clean and chronological. The shortcut. Jason's bathroom excuse. The missing keys. The missing radio. The orange tape. I did not mention the gross sight in front of my granddaughter. Some details don't belong in a child's ears. When I finished, the deputy asked Jason directly, "Why did you take his keys?" Jason's face flickered. "I didn't." Caleb stepped forward then, holding my truck's spare key between two fingers. "We found this," he said, "in the pocket of your SUV door." Jason swallowed. Amber's voice turned sharp. "This is ridiculous. He's making it up because he's embarrassed." The deputy's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to step back." Randall puffed up. "You can't treat us like criminals." Caleb looked at him. "Then stop acting like one." The deputy asked about the power of attorney folder. He flipped through it and frowned at the notary stamp. "Where was this notarized?" he asked. Amber said a town name too quickly. Caleb asked, "Do you have the notary's contact?" Randall snapped, "We don't have to answer all this." Caleb's voice didn't rise. "You don't have to, but then the sheriff gets to answer it for you." Here's where my revenge happened, and it didn't require fists or weapons or anything the forest would disapprove of, because while they were busy building their little story, I'd already prepared mine. Months earlier, after one too many, "Dad, can you cover this?" calls, I'd moved my assets into a trust, quietly, legally. I'd made Caleb and my attorney co-trustees. I did it because I'd seen this kind of hunger before. working missing persons cases where families fought over who got to sign paperwork while the body was still warm. My son didn't know any of that. Amber didn't know any of that. Randall and Marcy, with their smug little talk of taking advantage, had no idea they were already late. So when Amber waved that fake power of attorney like it was a weapon, she was swinging at air. The deputy took statements. The sheriff arrived later that night. More questions, more pressure. Jason tried to pivot into tears. "Dad, I thought you were safe," he said. "I came back. I swear." I looked at him. "You called me confused to a sheriff's deputy. You left me without keys. You stole my spare. You brought me down a route marked with fresh tape. And while I was out there, you told law enforcement I was declining." He opened his mouth. I didn't let him speak. "Say it," I told him quietly. "Say what this was really about." His eyes flicked to Amber, and that was enough. By morning, the sheriff's office had a working theory: reckless endangerment and possible elder exploitation. The deputy asked Amber and Jason for their phones. Amber refused. The sheriff didn't argue. He just told her they could refuse now or refuse later under a warrant. Randall started yelling about lawyers. Caleb leaned close to me and murmured, "They're scared." I watched Amber's hands shake as she held Lily by the shoulder. Too tight, like she could use my granddaughter as an anchor. I stepped forward and peeled Lily away gently. "She stays with me," I said. Amber's eyes flashed. "She's my daughter." "And I'm the reason you have a roof," I answered. "Not anymore." That afternoon, I left the cabin in Caleb's SUV with Lily beside me. The sheriff told Jason and Amber not to leave town. The search team, now angry they'd been used as props, looked at my son like he was something they'd scraped off their boots. In the weeks that followed, consequences arrived like winter. Jason was placed under investigation for the power of attorney documents. The notary stamp didn't match the state's records. The signature didn't match mine. Amber's parents tried to spin it socially. They told neighbors I was unstable, that I wandered. It didn't stick, because the sheriff's office doesn't like being manipulated, and mountain towns don't like outsiders who think they can play games with an old man's life. Lily told the truth in her own way. She said in a small voice at my kitchen table, "Mom said if you got lost it would be easier. Dad said you'd be fine because you know the woods. Grandpa, I tried to tell them to wait. Mom got mad." I didn't ask her for more details. I didn't need to carve deeper wounds into a child to prove what I already knew. I filed for emergency custody with my attorney. Briefly, efficiently. No drama, just protection. Amber fought it until the court asked why a 10-year-old was left overnight in a cabin while her grandfather was missing, and why her mother's first move was paperwork instead of pleading. Jason didn't look at me in court, not once. In the end, here's the part that still feels surreal. They didn't lose my money. They lost their masks. My trust stayed intact. My account stayed untouched. The cabin rental company received a report about the staged search, and the owner refused to rent to them again. The sheriff's office filed charges related to the abandonment and the forged documents. And Amber's parents, the smug couple who thought my life was quaint, discovered that small towns remember names. As for me, I got Lily. I got quiet mornings with my granddaughter eating cereal at my kitchen counter. I got to teach her how to read a map, not because she's going to be a ranger, but because she deserves to know she's never helpless. Sometimes she asks about the forest. "Were you scared?" she whispers. I tell her the truth. I was angry, I say, and I was determined. Because that's what the woods taught me all those years. Fear makes you sloppy. Determination brings you home. Now my son calls sometimes. He leaves voicemails that start with, "Dad, please," and end with "Amber didn't mean it." I don't call back, not because I want him ruined, but because he already made his choice when he drove away and didn't look in the mirror. So tell me, honestly, Was I right to let the law handle it and cut them off completely? Or should a grandfather forgive being left behind in the forest just because the people who did it share his last name?
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.